Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Well, today is a perfect example of why it's great to go to a live trial. I will tell you what, it was a wild day. We biggest question of the day is Brooks Houck's story imploding? Is it falling apart right in front of our eyes? Is he headed toward conviction because his story makes no sense? Also, though, did the state really screw up not once but twice today? We'll talk about that. And there was a triumphant cross examination by the defense of one of the witnesses the state put up today that may shed some significant light on why the state has not yet charged Rosemary Houck. We have today was just blazing fast. We had 12 witnesses today. Now, one of the 12 started yesterday, so I guess maybe that's a half witness, but still, that was amazing. In the afternoon, they were just witness, witness, witness. They'd be up 10 minutes, and then they move to the next one. And the judge is accepting no delays. You start at 8:30, you end at 5, and you go solid. There are many judges from cases we've covered, they end at 3, and then sometimes the prosecution isn't ready, and so they wait till the next day. You have a half day here, a day there. None of that is happening. Instead, what we have is a very fast-paced, tightly controlled trial. The judge is extremely serious about objections. None of those happen in front of us. All we get is the word objection at most, and then everybody goes up to the bar and the noise plays. So I want to get started. We have a ton to cover with 12 witnesses to cover. But I do want to give a little overview. I got a little feedback that for some of you who had not seen the original coverage of this case, or it had been a while, you're still kind of scratching your head trying to figure out, okay, who's who? How do these people fit together? What's going on here? So the defendant, and I have a little diagram that I want to put up for you. So let me add this to the stage so you can see it. Okay. So I'll go back to that other format, I think. Yeah. So you can see it really well. Okay. So the question of this trial is who killed Crystal Rogers. Now you see underneath the one person who is actually charged with murder is Brooks Houck, right there in the center. And he is the one, there are two people on trial right now. Brooks Houck is on trial, the one charged with murder. Also on trial right now is Joseph Lawson. His father, right below him, Stephen Lawson, has already been convicted. About a month ago, he was tried separately for reasons related to him having been a witness he thought he was going to get immunity, and that deal fell apart. There was a lot of litigation over that, where the two sides argued about whether or not really he was supposed to get immunity and should have, but it didn't happen. And so what you have is Joseph Lawson on trial now, his father having already been convicted. The two of them are charged more with the accessory and helping with the crime. Brooks Houck is directly charged with murder. Now, over to the left, you see the victim, Crystal Rogers. She disappeared. Her body has never been found. She disappeared on July 3rd, 2015. They believe, the prosecutors do, the Commonwealth, this is Kentucky, it's a Commonwealth, and they believe that Brooks Houck killed her with the help of disposing of the body with Joseph Lawson and Stephen Lawson, but that he was in charge of this. He's the central focus. So much so that, as I mentioned yesterday, Joseph Lawson is kind of off in the corner, and he's on trial, but we have heard for the first time from his lawyer today, and I'll tell you about that. It was a big moment since he hasn't said anything else. But right above Crystal, I want you to see her dad, Tommy Ballard. That is not technically an issue at trial right now, and it's not anything, I don't think, that the jury is going to hear about. But Tommy Ballard was shot in his own yard about a year after Crystal died. He actually, that very day, was going out once again as he organized a group to go out and try to find her body and to figure out where exactly she could be because he wanted to find justice for her. Tommy Ballard was killed, and many people believe it's connected. But so far, no one has been charged in connection with Tommy Ballard's death. He was shot, as I said, in his front yard. But it obviously just an incredible loss all at once for the entire family. So I'm going to pull that out. Those are kind of the key people you have to know. I do want to tell you, let me leave that up and we'll keep talking. There are two people not on there who are really important. They're important because from the very beginning of opening statement, the state told us, the Commonwealth told us, that these two people are conspirators. They were involved. They conspired to murder Crystal Rogers. And those two people are the mother and brother of Brooks Houck that you see right there, the main defendant in this case. And Rosemary Houck is the mother. Nick Houck is the brother. He was a police officer at the time. But the state has stated out loud to this jury that it believes Rosemary and Nick are conspirators in the murder of Crystal Rogers. But they're not charged. They haven't been charged at all. And I think we might have gotten a clue about why today. I'm going to tell you about that when we get to it. So let me remove that. Okay, that went ahead and was bid. All right, let's just get started because I have to move quick to get us through this. They covered so much ground today. Yesterday when we ended, we had Detective John Snow on the stand, and today they finished up the direct examination for him and started on the defense. And as I said at our lunch live today, during the lunch, I'm going live and just giving you a quick update, 10 minutes maybe, on what's happened so far so you can kind of keep up with the case. But the Kentucky, detective is, I think, probably the most important witness of the trial, unless, of course, the defendants actually testify. Then all bets are off. Obviously, they're the most important. But assuming they don't, the reason why he's so important, he's important for the state because he was the lead investigator for the first 4 years, and he has so much of the evidence that he brings into the case. But he is also critically important for the defense. They went out on a limb, kind of pitching this as a Karen Reed equivalent and talking about the overbearing state coming down on Brooks Houck. They saw him as the idea. They just insisted it was Brooks Houck. They didn't consider anybody else. All they cared about was Brooks Houck, and he did it, and they ignored everything else. And they railroaded him. So, but let me tell you, one of the things I had a question about. Okay, well, if you think that, then bring that evidence. And they did not. Let me assure you, Detective John Snow, at least based on what we know now, is no Michael Proctor. There were hints from Nick Houck in an interview Nick did that's posted on YouTube. There were hints from Nick that this Detective Snow was underhanded, that he had something bad, we didn't really know what, but something that made him unreliable. That's why, Nick said, he told his brother to stop interviewing with him. He wasn't one of the good cops, that he couldn't be trusted. But we got none of that in this case. Did the judge rule it out? If there were a true Giglio issue where he actually had done something and been reprimanded for it, or there'd been any kind of evidence or proof of it, I think we would have heard about that. So I would say no. So here's how. So I think the defense went pretty far out on a limb, and they did not bring what they promised to the jury in opening statement. They didn't deliver on that. All right. So they started off with a very frustrating period of it was really only about 15 minutes. It seemed longer, but they played a Kentucky State Police interview of Brooks Houck, audio only. And so there was no sound at all in the courtroom. The jurors have been given individual headphones so they can hear everything really clearly, but we couldn't hear that at all. So we just sat there like, okay. So I can't tell you anything about that. That's some evidence the jury has that we just don't. You can tell from what they asked in summary of the witness, a couple of key points from it. And there were really only a couple. One was apparently they ended with this question at the Kentucky State Police: what's the worst thing that ever happened to you? Or maybe they began with that. In the end, he couldn't answer that. Brooks Houck couldn't answer that. I think the suggestion by the Commonwealth is, if he had really been devastated that Crystal was missing, he would have easily answered, the worst thing that happened to me was Crystal disappearing. The worst thing that happened to me was losing the mom of my child, Eli. Things like that. But he didn't say that. And they said he couldn't answer. Is that true? I don't know. I couldn't hear it. I didn't get the special jury earphones. They also said that in this interview, Brooks Houck clearly stated that Crystal Rogers had been playing games on the phone when he went to bed on July 3rd. Now you might think, what does that matter? That seems awfully specific. Well, that's the pivotal time, because they went out together to Brooks's family farm that evening. They came home, and we'll talk about that because there's a lot brewing around that. But they came home on the 3rd, July 3rd, and according to Brooks Houck, just after midnight, he goes to bed, and she is still up playing games on her phone, sitting on the couch with their 2.5-year-old running around, because he won't go to bed until she does. If anyone's still up, he wants to stay up too. So the two of them were up. Brooks goes to sleep. When he wakes up in the morning, Eli's in the bed sleeping, but Crystal is gone. And that was the last time she was ever seen by anyone. No one heard from her. She stopped answering text messages the night before. But the Commonwealth says that story cannot possibly be true, because her phone went dead, total incommunicado, total out at 9:30 on the 3rd. So she could not have been up playing games on her phone at midnight. That's their story. So the argument that the defense made in opening statements, what they told the jury is, you're going to hear that he said this, that she was up playing games, but that isn't what he really said. What he really said was, that's what she usually did right before bed. She would usually go play games, but who knows if she did it right then. He didn't answer that question. So it's important, if he clearly stated that Crystal Rogers was up playing games on the phone, that would contradict what the defense said in opening statement. It would be a pretty important thing. But we didn't hear it. I'll just have to take their word for it. So they showed a Google Earth view of the farm where Brooks Houck and Crystal Rogers went that night. It was Brooks's family farm. His mother lived there. And we're definitely going to talk a lot about that. But let me keep going in order. One of the most important pieces of information that the Commonwealth has presented is that at just a little after midnight, at 12:07 p.m. on the 3rd, moving into the 4th, Stephen Lawson called Brooks Houck. It was just a 13-second call. Why? Well, of course, the Commonwealth's answer is they had done something with the body or the car, and he was just calling to say, it's all done, we're good, we fixed whatever the problem was. But but Brooks Houck's team says, no, that's not at all what it was. Stephen Lawson was just calling about a rental property for his, I think it was stepdaughter. So, and they say they have told the jury, you're going to hear evidence that that's the case. So in the first interview, Brooks Houck told the police, look, they said, do you get phone calls late at night? And he's like, no, not really. And it was just a matter of, I guess, 2 days since the time that he had received this midnight phone call, 12:07 phone call from Stephen Lawson. Then on the 8th of July, the 3rd is the last Crystal's heard from. On the 8th, Brooks Houck is interviewed again, and we will hear he was interviewed a lot. He thinks that means he cooperated. That's his argument. So he was interviewed on the 8th by Detective John Snow, and he gives him kind of a rundown, mostly confirmed. Let's talk a little bit about it. I do want to throw in one thing too. Brooks Houck, the picture you see right here of Brooks Houck, I'll add that back. I mean, to me, especially if you saw the whole picture, his very broad shoulders, he looks like a very young, healthy football player to me. But he does not look like that today. He looks really different. His hair is grayed to a good amount. It's very short. I don't know. He just looks really, really different. So we see this interview on July 8th, and as Brooks Houck is walking in, he's adjusting something in his pocket. The Commonwealth points this out. And what we learned from Detective Snow is he didn't know what was happening at the time. He didn't really even noticed it, but it didn't mean anything to him. Well, what happened was Brooks Houck was audio recording everything he said to the police. He was making his own tape, hiding it in his pocket. But and Detective Snow said, well, if he told me that, he could have just put it out on the table. It would have been clearer. I wouldn't mind. They found this later in a search warrant. So Brooks Houck pulls out or uses this audio recorder to confirm and to record exactly what he states to the police. The argument the Commonwealth makes is he's underhanded. He's trying to do things that just are weird and clearly indicate he must be somehow something's wrong with what's happening. Brooks Houck's argument is the reason, and we'll get more into it, but the reason I'm recording everything is I don't trust the police. I want a clear record of exactly what I stated to them, and I can't trust them to make that clear record. So basically, Detective Snow runs through what they've done so far as of July 8th on the interview. And most of it, he's saying, yeah, what you've said pretty close to checks out. That, for example, you said she was at Walmart. And yep, we've got some video from Walmart. She was there, close to that time. Sometimes the time you gave us was a little off, but that can happen. He did say we have a little bit of trouble with the whole Kylie thing. Kylie being the daughter and when exactly she left. But he winds up in the interview stating, for better or worse, you are the person of interest in the case. And the defense says, even with that knowledge, Brooks Houck tried to help them in every way. So Detective Snow tells him that, better or worse, you're the person of interest. Here's what I need from you. I need a very detailed, exact statement from you of exactly what you did on July 3rd and on July 4th. I need detail. I need to know exactly what you did, but particularly on July 3rd. Well, one of the things they know, or they believe at least from some video surveillance, is that on the 3rd, Brooks Houck spent the day out at the family farm. Why? That is not what he told police. Instead, he told police, or implied, that he was doing a lot of regular work kind of all around town. They hand him some sheets of paper. They sit him down in the interview room, hand him a pencil or pen, and they say, okay, go to it. Very, very detailed list. And he complies, an hour and 20 minutes worth of thinking. And at one point, it is so weird. He just sits and reads the whole thing out loud, everything from 4 p.m. to 7:30. Went to 3G cellular. And at first I was thinking, why is he doing that? That is so strange. There's no one in the room. My first thought is, there's someone there I can't see. Why is he reading this out loud just to himself? And then, of course, realized he had that recorder in his pocket. And the reason he was reading it out loud is so that he could record what he had, which was really not probably necessary, because Detective Snow had said, I'm going to give you a copy at the end. I'll make a copy. But the defense says this shows how much he doesn't trust the police. So he's been asked to be extremely detailed. I can't tell you how clear Detective Snow was about be detailed on what you did on the 3rd. But instead, he writes this very detailed account of where he was from 4 p.m. to 7:30, and then pretty much nothing before and nothing after. I mean, just he puts in stuff, but it's really doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not, I went here, I went there, I went to this job site, I met with this person, I sat in my car outside this restaurant and called 4 people. It's nothing like that. It's basically a to-do list of, here are things I need to do on a general basis, very detailed from 4 to 7:30. And then after that, he says, what we did was we went to the farm and we walked around. Now, this whole farm went to the farm. That is where I think he starts to fall apart, where his story begins to have a lot of trouble. All right, so let me make sure I don't want to skip anything. So, for example, what he writes down on what he did during the day before 4 o'clock. Remember, the police believe he was at the farm. Why? And even more importantly, if he was at the farm, why would he lie about it? I mean, it's his family farm. He does absolutely nothing wrong by going there, but he doesn't want them to know that. At least that's what the Commonwealth is suggesting. So he says, well, he had a list. They gave the jury a 3-ring binder with 8 pages inside. It was kind of a lot to do for just 8 pages, but they did refer to it all day long. So I guess that did make sense. These 8 pages were what he had written down when he was sitting there at the table inside the police getting the interview. And so they were allowed to have a copy and to look at it. We didn't get to see it all. Occasionally they would put up a little bit and you could get a snippet from it. But in general, it sounded like it said things like, and we'll hear more about it, but it said things like, I need to take the trash to this dump. I need to do this. I need to do that. These 4 people, I've got to mow this lawn, as opposed to at 2 o'clock, I, met with so-and-so and said, you need to mow the lawn. None of that actually occurred. So at this point, of course, the police are wondering, why? And I think that's the biggest question that remains for us. If, in fact, Brooks Houck actually murdered Crystal Rogers, why? Why would he do that? What did he get out of it? And they asked him, had Crystal talked about breaking up with you? Now, he said the same answer, and he said it every time he was asked. It really did sound pretty planned to me. But he would say each and every time, we fought like any couple, but in the last few years, always found ourselves together moving forward. And pretty much those exact words were what you heard over and over again. He said there had been talk of splitting up. He did not recall the exact dates of that. And when she got upset, she would always go to her Sabrina, that's her, I believe, cousin's house, or her parents' house. So that was what he thought, he says, was happening. When he woke up that morning of July 4th and she wasn't there, Eli was, he thought she had gone, she was maybe mad and had gone to the parents' house. So he did say, it's always been a stressful relationship. That's the truth. But we always found ourselves back together. And he said she had never talked kind of specific. She'd never gotten to the point where she said, yeah, I think I might be about to move out to an apartment. She wasn't actually making moves to do that. So, but it was interesting when that question was asked of him. It was, this is playing the interview. Obviously, he hasn't testified yet. But she said, he was asked, did she discuss specifics like moving out to an apartment? He said, can you repeat the question? And then he says, no, she's never talked about plans. Pull this down just a little bit. Okay. So at 7:19, they head out to the farm. The detective fills that time in for him. And this story is just, the whole story is strange. This is what he says. He says, Crystal and I decided to go to the farm. Now, you have to understand that according to what Crystal told her daughter and 2 friends, and we've heard them testify, according to what she told them, she thought they were having date night and they were going to be going someplace fun and special. They had a babysitter for all 5 of her children and they were going to be free and clear. Instead, they went to his family farm, and you need to know that his mother lived on the farm, and they did not get along. Apparently his mother, according to what we've heard from one of the witnesses, really disliked Crystal, thought that she was inappropriate as a match for Brooks. And apparently at the time, and I really appreciated one of my subscribers sent this to me, thank you, said that at the time she had pink hair and they didn't like her hair. The pictures I've seen of her, she was blonde, so I guess there was a period when she had pink hair and that really bothered Brooks's mom. And that Brooks, and I don't know if this is true, but according to what someone sent me, that he was actually running for sheriff. And I just can't believe they wouldn't have mentioned that if that were the case. It's such an important point. But they, for all those reasons, Mom didn't approve. Rosemary Houck didn't like Crystal. So you've got a picture. This is what she thinks is happening. This lovely, going out together, special date night. And instead, they go to the home of a person who really hates her. They walk around outside the entire time for 4 hours in July, and it's hot, I'm sure, except that it's raining the entire time. So they walk all around the farm for 4 hours in the rain with a 2.5-year-old. That is so radically different from the image that her friends and Kylie say she had of what was about to happen. But according to Brooks, this was what she wanted to do. She had the option, a lovely dinner out, maybe a movie, something fun. No, what I'd like to do is go to the farm of someone who hates me and walk around in the mud, in the rain with a 2.5-year-old. That sounds way better. That is what the argument is. And it just sounds strange when it kind of gets put out like that. But he talked about how they walked around, and the detective made a really interesting observation. He said, yeah, but there was a bulldozer that moved, and tell me about the bulldozer that moved. And Brooks said, yeah, I moved it to that spot because, and he went into a lot of detail here. For many points, he went into incredible great detail. And then there was the whole day of the 3rd, which was just did stuff. So on Saturday, for example, he said he moved the bulldozer because there was and that was the 4th, the big door on the barn had water going in front of it. There was some kind of runoff. And so Rosemary Houck, was concerned about this, and he wanted to fix it. And that's why he moved the bulldozer. He also said and acknowledged, I'm probably getting ahead of any kind of inquiry about this, but he actually, that night of the 3rd, when he and Crystal were there, one thing they did was feed the cows. Another thing they did was start a fire. So he actually burned something on the property that night of the 3rd. That he said his mother, Rosemary Houck, was always complaining about the trash, but he didn't like to take all of his construction company trash to the city dump because it cost a lot. So what he would do is bring it out to the farm and burn it there. And it would be a lot cheaper than taking it to the dump. And he did that on Friday night. And he would try to just do it kind of regularly so it wouldn't be a huge deal. So the detective said, well, okay, so y'all stay there till roughly midnight. I mean, isn't that kind of late for a 2.5-year-old to be running around a muddy farm in the rain? And he's like, oh, well, this is normal because my girlfriend, Crystal Rogers, stays up late. And so he does too. He's kind of used to that. And then he talked about, she normally plays a game when we go to bed. She's on the phone messing around. And then he agreed with that. Yes. She's on the phone messing around. Yes, he agreed with that. So that would be kind of the second time that he said that. The Kentucky one I couldn't hear being the first. That he said, and let me be clear, he said all along that she might do that. She usually did that. The big question is, did he affirmatively state she was on her phone? And if so, can the state Commonwealth prove that she could not have been on her phone because the phone was dead at 9:30. It turned off and did not turn back on until I think it was the 6th of July. So he talked about that morning when he woke up and Eli was still sleeping and Crystal was not beside him. This is the 4th. They've had that super fun evening in the rain and mud at the farm. And now Crystal is not there. He wakes up. He said, I noticed and I called her at some point. And he added this. He said, a lot of times she and her sister Brooke, they do stuff. They do these fantasy parties. All these girls get together, and when they go out and party, they stay out all night. But okay, so you have to think it's already after midnight. They're getting home after midnight. They've established that with the video of the vehicle they were driving. So they're getting, and plus Rootshouse admits that. He goes to bed. It's after midnight. Eli is running around and will not go to bed until everyone does. Yet somehow on a phone that's dead and doesn't turn on, Crystal gets a call from her sister Brooke, who was like, hey, I gathered that your fun time with the boyfriend didn't go so well tonight. That one of her friends had called it sexy time. That I gathered that didn't really go all that well, in that you ended up going to a farm in the rain all day. And then when you came home, he says he went straight to bed. So that wasn't really fun, but I got an idea. I know I don't normally call you maybe at 1 a.m, but let's have a party. I'm sure all of our friends are up and wouldn't mind starting a party right here and now. Let's go and do it. And so that apparently he thought she went. I mean, what I'm saying is this had nothing to do with anything. There is zero possibility that at 1 a.m, the two women talked and said, hey, let's suddenly have a party together. And apparently these parties involved buying sexual toys or something. I don't know exactly how it worked, but that they would stay up together all night at this party. It was just this group. So it just doesn't make any sense at all. It had nothing to do with anything. There's no possibility that that's what was happening that night. And even so, it would have to be that Crystal, with Eli still running around the house, is like, sure, let me come over and let's have this party. Go ahead and call all our friends and wake them up so we can have this really fun time. And I'm sure my 2-year-old will be just fine. So, and then we got into some questions about, he was asked a question, what does Eli do at the farm? If you're with him at the farm like you were on the 4th, what does he do? And he said, well, he's got, 5 to 6 tricycles and big wheels. And then he says he does whatever he does. Oh, dear. This sounds like a very dangerous situation for a 2-year-old. I swear, I think he said, I meant to ask around about this because I could not possibly have heard this correctly, that Eli drove all the tractors out there before. I have to have misheard that. I'll have to ask around because there's no way the 2-year-old had driven all the tractors there. I just don't believe that. So I do see too, first of all, I need to say thank you to some people. Todd, thank you so much for gifting Lawyerly memberships. And Beth, thank you as well for gifting those. Chop Trials has been a member for 12 months. I'm so glad to have you. And I'm enjoying covering the case. It's a very interesting one. Italian Pam Lee says, justice for Crystal, absolutely. And Mildred says, the conspiracy these people engaged in is shocking, a senseless and cruel crime. So thank you all for your super chats and comments. I appreciate it very much. And I'll try to leave these up on the screen. Sorry, I forgot about that for a minute, but I'm back on track. All right, so the detective at this point, and this is in the interview, presses him on, look, you really haven't given me any answer on what you did on the 4th. You haven't told me what you did on the 5th. And he said, I thought this was, some of those gaps become really important. And I thought, well, that's a really good comment, Detective Snow. So that whole, according to Brooks Houck, the whole story that she told about how they were going to have a date night, that was actually false. And the reason he says that she did that was she told Kylie, her daughter, that because Kylie really struggled with not having a father figure. And Kylie had gotten on the stand and told us that as well. But he said Crystal was dropping the other kids off with their dad, and she wanted to drop Kylie off with someone else, but she didn't want it to feel to Kylie like, oh, I'm just getting rid of you for the evening. And so she told, oh yeah, they're all of you are going with babysitters so that, Brooks and I can have a special evening. She told Kylie that, not telling her that in fact Eli was not going to be going to someone else. Eli was staying with them. But the problem with that was it didn't really hold up. For example, Christina Holly got on the stand and told us that she talked. In fact, we saw text messages where she said, we've got a babysitter for all of the children, and Brooks and I are going out tonight. So, and the detective pressed him a little bit about that. All right. Getting into the question of that phone call at, how am I doing? 36. Oh, that's okay, because it gets pretty fast in here when we go into some of the witnesses. So I feel good about this. Is, like I said, the most important witness. So remember that phone call that came in from Steve Lawson at 12:07. And according to what Brooks Houck said, he said to Stephen Lawson, I see that you want something, you want a rental for your stepdaughter, thanks for telling me. That's Crystal. You'll have to talk to Crystal, but you'll need to call her in the morning. And the detective says, well, but if Crystal is sitting right there beside you, why don't you just hand her the phone and deal with it then? And he said, well, she don't want to deal with stuff like that late. That's ridiculous. Okay, so Nick, we talked a little bit today, or they do in the interview, about Nick Houck, who in the middle of the interview apparently called his brother and was like, get the H out of there. You shouldn't be talking to the police. That's what we're given to believe. But Detective Snow admits he doesn't really know exactly what Nick Houck said. What he does know is that Brooks hangs up the phone and says, he thinks I should not keep doing this. My brother thinks I should not keep doing this. And Nick said that he said the police were trying to F you or F us, and they couldn't remember exactly what the words were. They then played a clip of a Nancy Grace interview of Brooks Houck. And in that, some of the things he said seemed contradictory to some of the things he said elsewhere. For example, and this would be another example of a situation where comments made in the public media could end up harming a defendant. Karen Reed had some issues with that. It ended up not being a problem. For Brooks Houck, here's what he said in the little clip they played. That they ate at the house for 1.5 hours. So I should be clear. This is on the 3rd again, the evening when Crystal and Brooks supposedly go to the farm and have the fun evening in the rain and the mud. And so to start it all off, their super fun date, they just ate at home. And the detective said, did she cook? And he says, no, we just ate at home. Like, okay, they must cook like I do. That would really explain a lot. So she was, and he stated she was playing games on her phone when I went to bed. Stated that to Nancy Grace, and it was a pretty flat out, I think I got it pretty much a quote. She was playing games on her phone when I went to bed. And she had the baby running loose in the house. So then I went to bed about 12. She was still up playing games on the phone. So he said that a couple of times. Yesterday, I raised that issue of that Terrell tip, and I was so confused about it, as were other people in the courtroom, where apparently a couple named Terrell came to the police and said, we saw Crystal Rogers on Sunday. Now, the last time she had been seen was Friday, and she hadn't been seen or heard from since Friday. And they said, we saw her at this different place with her car, and she was, we saw her there. It was Sunday, and she was alive. So that got everybody excited. But in fact, when the police tracked it down, they discovered that it was they were actually able to find the woman with the somewhat similar car and determined that that wasn't Crystal and it wasn't Crystal's car. So the detective said, yeah, I told Brooks Houck about this, about, the rug pull on this excitement was not going to pan out. And there was no noticeable reaction. is what he stated. They play the surveillance video. They really seem to place a lot of stock in this. The Commonwealth doesn't. I just don't really get it as being that big a deal. Remember that Houck was interviewed, and in the middle of the interview, he gets this call from his brother. After that, there's surveillance video showing Brooks driving back to the family farm, and right behind him, Nick's car, or maybe the other way around, could have been Nick in front. Nick drove a police cruiser, so it was pretty easy to spot. And they are right together going back to the farm. And I think the implication of that to the Commonwealth is Nick was working to try to protect him, and they were hiding things as part of this conspiracy. But I don't know. I mean, maybe they just were going to the farm together. I just didn't, to me, that didn't really impact the way some of the other evidence does. All right, now we get to the cross. And remember what I said, the cross of Detective Snow was so important for the defense because they made it important. When it came to what they said in opening statements, they made it crucial. It really needed to be huge. They needed to deliver, and it was good. It wasn't bad, but I don't think they delivered what was promised in opening statements. So they went through a list of all of the things that the police had done to try to find Crystal's body, to try to find Crystal's killer, to try to find the murder weapon, the crime scene, anything, and how utterly unsuccessful they were. That they worked a lot of hours, many agencies, many people, four-wheelers, helicopters, massive amounts of manpower, and nothing. They interviewed witnesses, many witnesses, collected many pieces of potential evidence, multiple cell phones, did video surveillance, more than 70 search warrants from just a single agency. Houck consented to have his house searched. They did multiple searches of the farm. I think they did 2 of his house. And that was consented to by Rosemary Houck, although they went into an explanation of how they ended up getting a warrant, even though she had consented, because she was out of town and they didn't feel comfortable with that. And as they were searching the farm, they searched that debris pile, the burn pile. At no point did they find any evidence of foul play at the farm. And when they searched, at no point did they find it. And they also charged absolutely no one. They were not able to come up with the method of death. They were not able to even find proof of a crime scene. And throughout this early period, Houck, they stressed, was cooperative. He was trying to help. And they gave one example. At one point, the detective says, "I'd like to look at your phone." And he's like, "Okay, well, it's out in the car." And they said, "Okay, go get it." And he said, "I want you to come with me because I want there to be proof that I'm not tampering with it in any way. I want you to see me get it and hand it to you completely unchanged." And so they did do that. So Brooks was interviewed on the 5th. The 6th, he was called in, but not interviewed. On the 7th, he was interviewed. On the 8th, he was interviewed. And he was told specifically, they wanted the jury to know this, they wanted people to know this, that when they did a press conference about Crystal's disappearance, they asked him, "Do not come. It's going to be awkward because we're having Sherry, the mother of Crystal, and Crystal's family, and they think you did it, right or wrong. They think you did it, so please stay away." He clearly was suspicious of the police, and that was really clear by the fact that he was recording his own statement, that he was reading out his own statement, he was recording his interview, and they pointed out that in that statement he wrote out, for everywhere he stopped writing on the page, he drew X's or lines below it, so it would be clear that he hadn't written anything in that space. He stopped right there. And they said, this is just a level of the defense is saying this is a level of suspicion of the police. This doesn't indicate he's hiding something. It means he doesn't trust them. And that they argued that weird situation where in the middle of the interview, he suddenly calls Steve Lawson, that really that's an example of him trying to be cooperative, because Steve Lawson was he found this number, called him at 12:07, and they don't know who it is. And he immediately just says, well, just call the person back, see who it is. And he wasn't hiding it. And he did call Steve, and it was put on speakerphone. And he said, first he said, hey, thinking about hiring you some more. He did go into that. And then he says, and also, I'm thinking about hiring you. I also want to say, just, you called me and I can't remember why you called me. Why did you call me again? And he says, yeah, I had a stepdaughter. She had been evicted from one of Brooks Houck's home and later wanted to rent from him again. And he was trying to talk Brooks Houck into it. And by the way, that may not pan out. It didn't seem to at Steve Lawson's trial. Brooks Houck, according to what the defense argued, did a lot to take the police off some of the sorts of theories that might have helped him if he was really the murderer. Like they said, could she have unalived herself? He was like, oh no, that's not possible. Well, was she like a heavy drinker? No, she wasn't. Did she do drugs? Nope. Was she cheating? No, I don't think so. And he wasn't cooperating with coming up with these alternate theories. And if he didn't come up with those alternate theories, maybe that's because he actually wanted to find her, is what they were arguing. Camilla, thank you. I appreciate it. Camilla's been a member for 8 months. Glad to have you for 8 months. And thank you. It's always different reporting from the road. I'm just glad that we are live tonight. That's really exciting. And thank you, Neurosightseeing. I appreciate that from both of you. All right. So they got a little bit into, we talked about this some yesterday, about the fact that those interviews are released and on YouTube. We're going to watch one of them this weekend together. And so how did those get released? Apparently, we got a little information about that. They were sent to the Barnestown Police Department for an employment matter. That was related to whether or not they would be firing Nick Houck. They were really upset that Nick had counseled his brother to stop talking to the police. They thought that was sort of not in the band of brotherhood kind of notion. And so they apparently put them or released them and then to the Gazette, and that got put on the internet, which made it to YouTube. And it was, quote, the subject of podcasts. Like, oh dear, not that. Please, not podcast. All right. So after lunch, we got into some phone calls between Brooks and Crystal Rogers. And don't worry, it's going to go a lot faster from here. Because we're about to get to the end of this. There were 3 phone calls from Brooks to Crystal Rogers on the morning after she disappeared. So this is now July 4th, no longer July 3rd. And he called her 3 times, 9:06 a.m., 12:18 a.m., and then 6:41 a.m. the next day. So he called her twice on the 4th and once on the 5th. And there was one piece of information that I thought was really strong that we have been told and understood from the Commonwealth, that one of the things that made them particularly suspicious about Brooks Houck was the fact that he is not the one who called the police to report his wife missing. Like, he wakes up, she's not there, and he's like, oh, I'm sure she'll turn up sometime, and never really called the police. Well, what on earth? And it was her mother who reported it a couple of days after she wasn't seen, I think on the 5th, after she disappeared on the 3rd. So, but he did point out that before Sherry, the mother, spoke to him, because she did speak to him and said, we need to contact the police. And she spoke to him when she saw him at a gas station. But before that, on the morning of the 5th, he wrote a police officer friend and said, will you try to get hold of Crystal for me? I tried to call her, but there's no response yet. They went back and forth, and the detective or police officer says, yeah, well, that's what's happening to me too. I can't get through to her either. And so he said, okay, do you have Sabrina's number? That's the cousin. And then he writes Sabrina by 9:30 on the morning of the 5th and says, what's up? It's Brooks. is Crystal with you? And Sabrina says, no, haven't seen her. And then on the 5th at 4:33, he writes to Crystal Reed. He texts her. So by now, he's called her 3 times over a period of 2 days, and now a text at 4:33 in the afternoon. And he says, everyone is worried sick. Why won't you text me back? They then took us flashback. This is July, all the way back to 6 weeks earlier, April 25th, when there was an exchange of emails, or probably texts actually, between Crystal and Brooks. And Crystal says to Brooks, I cannot deal with the way you treat me. You put me on the back burner. You do things for everyone and not for me. And Brooke told her, please come back home. Leaving late at night with nowhere to go is not good. Running from your problems won't fix them. And obviously, the defense believes that this is good information for them because it suggests that, in fact, she ran from her problems. But the Commonwealth says that what this shows is that they really were having some troubles between them, and he was only pretending that they weren't having trouble. They went through the list of things the defense did that did not pan out for the Commonwealth. There was a fingerprint, an identifiable one, found on the cell phone. Everyone's excited, and it matches absolutely no one you might think it could possibly match. Then there was a rear view mirror fingerprint, but that turned out to be Eli, the 2-year-old. There was a partial palm print that was not ID'd as anybody, and there was DNA on the steering wheel, but that was Crystal's, and nobody else was found. There were tape lifts to gather hair around the car. There were 13 hairs on the seat and 38 on the floorboard. 2 of them were suitable for DNA testing, but the decision was made not to test them. Now, the defense said to detectives, no, and the reason you didn't test them is because you figured they couldn't be Steve or Joey, and you didn't want anything more than that. They were long, and they have short hair, so you figured it wasn't the same. And he said, well, really the reason was we could see that we didn't have a person it could match, and we understood the testing could destroy the hairs. Okay. One of the facts that's new, I think, in the case, at least new, it may have been in Steve Lawson's case. I don't know about that, but when the car, Crystal's car, was found on the side of the Bluegrass Parkway, abandoned with her purse and her phone inside it, that it had a flat tire, and there were marks on the roadway consistent with riding on the rim right before this, and then the person driving it had to get off the road. And the defense says, okay, that flat tire shows she must have been driving it. She really did have a flat tire right there. None of this was staged. She actually had one, or there wouldn't be marks on the roadway. They talked about and kind of went through a litany of Brooks Houck consented to the search of his home. Nothing was found there. Search of his truck. Nothing found there. Nick's vehicle, the white Tundra, was searched. Nothing there. His police cruiser was searched. Nothing there. They got into a little something about Cox's Food Market and about how a detective, Kevin Cox, went there to review surveillance video from the important days of July 3rd and 4th, and viewed it and then didn't collect it. And Detective Snow was just like, I can't tell you. But it sounded like they felt like there was some critical piece of evidence that was missing, but it went nowhere. So Joey Lawson's attorney got up and did a cross. I think this was the first one. I don't think I'm wrong about that, and it was classic. He's like, so you've been testifying now for, a full day, multiple hours. And at no point did you mention Joey Lawson. Is that correct? He said, yeah, okay, it's pretty much true. And all we did hear about him was that he was excluded. Like, it wasn't his DNA. It wasn't his fingerprint. And that's all we know, right? And they were like, okay, yeah. So that is more and more, you're just starting to see the huge difference in the approach, because the case is aimed at Brooks Houck. Joey Lawson just kind of the afterthought almost. He is barely in the case, and we'll see whether or not the state meets its burden of proof for him. he, according to what they said in opening, admitted moving the car to the side of the road for pay. So we will see how and when that comes in. So all right. On Redirect, they talked about the fact that he sometimes drove Crystal Reed's car, Brooks did, but that his DNA wasn't found in there. But I didn't think they also they themselves, the Commonwealth itself, made the point that no one had wiped it down, because if someone had wiped it down, surely they would have done a better job than to leave those fingerprints and the DNA and the hairs. If they did a really poor job, if they only managed, or very unique job, if they only managed to remove Brooks Houck's DNA and all the rest of that was left. Okay, so in the afternoon, we got into we did get our first jury questions. Question number 1, were messages left with the 3 phone calls? Remember those 3 phone calls where Brooks is like, hey, Crystal, how come, where are you, on the 4th and 5th? Were messages left? And the Detective Snow said, well, the data wouldn't tell us, but that given the duration of them, I would think no. The second question, were the clothes from Walmart found in the house? And the answer was no. And that was really curious, because I think they meant the clothes she purchased at Walmart. Like, where were those? That was an interesting question. We didn't get an answer on that. Okay, and so now we start a zip through several witnesses. And I'm going to tell you why I think this was really a problem for the Commonwealth. I don't think this worked well at all as they thought it would. Witness number 5, Marcella Ray, owns a Radio Shack in Bardstown, and one of her employees sold a digital recorder to Brooks Houck, probably the very one he had in his pocket when he went into the police station and taped his own interview. And they showed the jury a picture that their surveillance took on that. She remembered this clearly because apparently she didn't like the way Brooks was treating Eli, who was with him. She said he made him hold his head down the whole time, that he asked for the best digital recorder, and they printed a picture of Brooks Houck holding the boy, and she held on to that for years until she contacted the FBI. She held the records until 2020, and then she turned those in. We didn't get to see that picture. I am not really sure what that means exactly. It sounded to me like she was suggesting it was cruel, the way he was treating the little boy. It seemed so prejudicial. I was surprised that it came in. But not having seen the picture, it's kind of hard to even know what they're talking about. Witness 6, Diane Thompson, circuit court clerk from Bardstown. And the clerk of court, and she said, yeah, one of the things, remember how Brooks Houck had that list of things he did during the day on the 3rd? And one of them was list of names and addresses for evictions. And they had the circuit court clerk get up and say, well, he couldn't have filed anything because we were closed on the 3rd because of the holiday of the 4th. We weren't even open. I just thought that really that doesn't make sense. He said on that list, which frankly sounded much more like a to-do list of things to do. He said, list of names and addresses for evictions. That's really different from file actual requests for evictions with the court clerk. But they went through just a whole series of witnesses pretty much just like that. And witness 7, Steve Alberry with Kentucky Home Siding, said, yeah, I didn't work with Brooks that day. It was raining. We don't really work in the rain. So I don't think I contacted him. Witness 8, Peggy Parent, said he would come into our office sometimes to get the electric turned on in one of his new projects where he had done construction on it, but he couldn't have come in that day because we were closed on the 3rd and we wouldn't have communicated with him. So, but again, she seemed very indignant about the whole thing. She was, did you have any communication with him on the 3rd? No. But honestly, it didn't really seem to work for the Commonwealth to me, because at no point did Brooks say, yeah, at 3:50, I went in to speak to, he got her last name wrong, Peggy Smith. It was really Peggy Parent, but he said, he didn't say, yeah, I went in to speak to him. And said it was always things that were much vaguer than that. It was really just like, here are the things I do in general on a day, or things I need to do in the future. Next witness, it was get addresses for Salt River to change bulbs and give to Peggy. So, I mean, there's nothing about that that says he did it on that day. Honestly, the much bigger point, in my opinion, was the point they made at first, which is he didn't answer the question. He was supposed to give a very detailed statement of exactly what he did all day long, and he didn't do that. Witness 9, James Palmer, HOA president of the board in Woodlawn Springs. And he apparently, Brooks Houck, was not being a good neighbor with some of his projects that he was working on. And he had in his notes something to do: mow all vacant lots and keep trash picked up. That's different from saying, I personally went and mowed the lawn or asked someone to at 10 a.m. And then at 11, I got the trash picked up. He didn't say that. He just said, mow all the vacant lawns. And so they went through the fact that they sent him more letters after this, and he wasn't in compliance. So on the 3rd, he couldn't have been doing all of those things. I just didn't really think he'd said he was. Witness 10, Richie Griggs, said, yeah, he was my top client. He was a realtor, did construction work as well. And he said that they left that Crystal and Brooks had moved, and that they had left their stuff in another house. They needed to get it, and she was working with him to get that. She was actively planning to get some of the stuff from there. And there was this question: if Brooks Houck says you were at his house Saturday night, were you? He said, no, I was at the lake. I honestly don't remember him saying that he had been there Saturday night. That must have been in one of the interviews. But one of the things he said, there was a sidebar, and then just after that, he says I confirmed with multiple people sitting there, because this was very hard to hear. There was an objection right away, but what the group believed, the consensus was that he said that a week before he had been there, maybe at the lake with Brooks and Crystal, and that Crystal accused Brooks of cheating on her. And the sidebar objection, and the court said after this discussion, he told the jury, what was said before was inadmissible. You need to strike that. That doesn't apply. That has nothing to do with anything. It's not a fact. And interestingly, I saw a number of the jurors nodding when he said that. So I think they were ready to accept that. So instead, I guess consolation prize, the Commonwealth was allowed to ask the question: was Crystal worried that Brooks Houck might move her out? And she said, and he said, yes, she was worried about that. She was preparing herself to leave and was worried about Brooks kicking her out. Next witness, number 11, is Brad Spalding, Nelson County engineer. And he said, you may remember, on Brooks's list of all the things he supposedly did that day of the 3rd, he wrote mow all lots and haul trash to landfill. And so they came and said, well, he didn't come to the landfill. So if he was trying to suggest he actually did that day, he didn't actually do it that day. Witness 12, Mike Powers, construction with Musics in Bardstown. And on July 3rd, he said, I wasn't doing business with Brooks Houck on that day. And it was really like, he just said, no, I didn't do business with him. But there was like no evidence, or, how would he remember that from July 3rd, 2015? But he said he was sure he wasn't doing business with him. Witness 13, Danny Singleton. And he had a conversation, and this is the part where I was telling you, this may be why Rosemary Houck has not been charged. This did not go well at all for the Commonwealth. I'm going to try to put everybody's up because I know it's kind of short. All right. So this witness said that Rosemary Houck came to him and said she wanted to find someone to help her get rid of Crystal Rogers. And she asked him directly. Now, this is Brooke's mother. And he's saying Brooke's mother came to me and said she wanted help getting rid of Crystal Rogers. She didn't ask him directly, but she wanted to know if he could find her somebody. And every juror, just about every juror who writes, was writing all of this down like, wow, Rosemary said that. And he told her, well, you got enough money, you can get just about anything done, but didn't take any action, wasn't asking him. Can you still hear me? I feel like I jiggled that. I don't want to mess that up. Make sure. Hopefully you can. I don't want to mess this up. Here at the end, as we're nearing it. Okay, so they all wrote down that Rosemary Houck had said that, but he was very clear she wasn't asking him to do this, and he took no steps to find anyone for her. That just wasn't something he would do. They did get him to say, yes, he had been charged with perjury, and he had served 8 months of time for that. It was lowered to just 3 counts of false testimony and time served. The cross of this witness, though, was absolutely excellent. It really was. It was really well done. They started off, you drank heavily at that time. You did drugs and cocaine. And he said, yeah, I did that. And they went through the interviews he'd given. And they said, in June 2016, you were interviewed by Detective John Snow, and he asked you, do you know anything at all about what's happened? And you told him no. And in 2015, that may have been June 2015, but it couldn't be June. Okay. 2015, you talked to the grand jury, and you were asked by the prosecutor, have Rosemary Houck, Nick Houck, or Brooks Houck ask your assistance in killing or murder? And he said no. And the prosecutor asked, what are you going to do to convince the jury that you didn't do it? Was it raining when you drove the car down the Blue Ridge Parkway? And the point of the defense was they were really pressuring him to suggest or admit that he had killed Crystal Rogers, or putting that aside, just to say that Rosemary, Nick, or Brooks had asked him to help, that he was involved in it. That he got a lot of pressure. So with this pressure, he lied, admitted it, lied, said so on cross-examination. He lied to the grand jury. And what he told them was, no, on the 3rd, I went to this bar in Louisville with Tim Johnson, who had been my friend for 3 or 4 months. And I talked to this girl, and Tim picked me up and drove me there, and I met this girl. All of that totally false. And the reason, according to the cross-examination, was he made it up because he didn't want to tell them what he was really doing, which was he was doing drugs with a female named Sandy at his apartment. And he didn't want anybody to know that. Then on July of 2015, he was interviewed by the FBI. He was asked about Rosemary Houck. Do you see her having any involvement? And he said, no. I wonder if that's 2015. That's what I wrote down. Did you hear any threats from Rosemary Houck? And he said no. And then he says that it had to have been 15, because just 6 months later in December, they arrest him and give him a bond of $300,000, clearly more than he could ever make. And on the 5th of April, so sits in jail for 4 months, really. And then he gets a visit in jail from investigators. And for the first time, makes a statement about Rosemary Houck. Up until then, nothing had been said. They cut a deal with him, and instead of he was reduced down to a 90-day jail sentence. He'd already served all of that time. And even so, the defense pointed out, Brooks Houck still did not get arrested. So all of these things go for years and years, and Brooks Houck is never arrested. They have all of the evidence now, then that they have now, and they didn't arrest him. Years went on like this. And then in 2023, July of 2023, the Kentucky State Police come to him and say they want to make sure he's quote, on the right side of it. And he says, yes, they wanted me to tell the truth, and I'm doing it. He also told them that Crystal Rogers' brother had threatened to kill her. He says that's true also. They've been fighting like cats and dogs. And he said, the brother stated, someone should take her to the woods and blow her damn brains out. So that came in, obviously, possible third-party culprit that they didn't investigate. Witness 14, Chris LeSueur, talked about the window tinting that happened late in the game. Like on June 26th, he gets several phone calls where Brooks is looking at doing window tinting and said he was ready to get it. They had an appointment open up on the 2nd, so he went ahead and had his windows tinted. He wanted them, quote, very dark. He had them, in fact, 5% or limo tint. And that means that only 5% of light comes through. The legal amount is 20 for the rear, 35 for the sides. The amount he got on there was not legal, we were told. And he came in 2 months later and asked about getting the tint removed. And they said, well, did he tell you that's because he got pulled over by the police? And he said, yes, and in fact, that is why he wanted it done. We heard in opening that the reason he wanted the windows tinted had nothing to do with hiding the body as he was carrying Crystal around, but instead had to do with a medical condition of his son. And we were told we were going to see medical records, so we will find out. All right. So next witness also talked about window tinting and basically contacts where Brooks Houck was looking into getting the windows tinted. And we ended for the day about, I think about 20 minutes early, something like that. Although that is a really long day. All right. So let me see if y'all have any questions. If you wouldn't mind putting your question marks at the beginning. You know what I, of course, forgot to say, per usual, is would you mind hitting the like button? That will really help us get the video out to more people. If you would also subscribe. If you're not a subscriber, we would love to have you come back for more. I cover the legal cases everybody's talking about, and we would love to have you back. So, okay, I'm looking for questions. If you could put your question marks at the beginning, I would appreciate it. Miss Spunky is in the state of confusion. Oh no, that is never what I want to hear. I'm so sorry. I would like to make it super clear. Hopefully, as we go through the case, it'll get easier and easier for all that. Ask Mickey's Mouse wants to know, did I get to meet any of the Ballard family? I've met 2, I think. I just introduced myself. I haven't really gotten to talk to them. I really do need to. I am so shy, though. It is very hard for me. So anyway, I need to do that. Has the courtroom been at capacity? Tiffany asked. Not quite. There are a ton of family members there. I counted today. I think there are 25 or 30 for Crystal's side, and then for the Commonwealth. And then on the defense, they had 10, which is really high for the defense. And they have more seats set aside. So a good part of the seats are set aside for family and media. So there are still some left, but it's pretty full. It's mostly full. Is this another case of sloppy police procedures? Asks Evil Oddish. You know, I honestly don't think so here. They tried so hard. I mean, they would love to find that body, and they have tried and they have tried and they've tried, and they have not been able to do that. And they went out right away and got all that video. I don't feel like that's what it is. I don't feel like there's been any sort of hint that it was really sloppy and they didn't bother to look. I just think whatever happened, they haven't been able to crack. Okay, Neat Noodle asking, yesterday you said the day went to the prosecution. How about today? So I'm definitely going to ding the prosecution on all those witnesses that really just didn't take the case anywhere. But Detective Snow was, just so strong, and mostly the defense did not follow through on what it promised the jury. That is such a big mistake. Juries really listen to you in opening, and they count on you actually following through. So I am going to call it for the prosecution for that. Although I do want to give them major props for the cross-examination of the one witness. It was absolutely well done. Very excellent cross-examination. Okay. Purple pixie dust. There's no motive. It's not really clear. The only hint we have was crossed out, that she accused him of maybe having an affair or cheating on her, but now the jury's been told to disregard that. So all we have is that the mother didn't like her, and that, maybe she did think that he might kick her out at any time. And so maybe she was making plans to move out with the kids. That's really about all we've got. Peaches, what other crimes is Brooks involved in? Money laundering. Not that I'm aware of. Annie, your coverage is stellar. Thank you. Do you have a private leaning yet? I do have a private leaning, but we will keep that private. I really try so hard, and Annie knows this. Annie's been around forever, and so that's her point, I think. I try really hard to be as unbiased as possible so that you can make up your own mind, learn the facts, and figure out what you think. So I try really hard to hold that back right till the end. Are her parents still living? Abry asks. Abry, 1984. Well, that is actually not part of the case, but part of the circumstances surrounding the case. Her mother is and is present in trial, but her dad is not. He was shot in his yard. Some people believe it might be connected to the fact that he was actively looking for Crystal. Maybe he got too close, and so they believe it could be connected. No one has been arrested for that. I have not seen Eli in court, Anita. Children aren't allowed there, and I think he would be 12 now, right? 12 and a half. So I don't know if he would be allowed in the court. Being a family member, they might, but I don't know. That would be just unbearably difficult. That would be a lot to ask of a 12-year-old, I think. So I don't think I've seen him anyway. Maybe I saw him and didn't realize it. Looking for question marks at the beginning. Tina Lucille, wasn't it about custody of the son? It may be. That may be exactly what it was about. We just don't have a lot of evidence to back that up. There have been some hints about it, but nothing saying they were about to break up. She was leaving. She was getting an apartment. She was ready to go somewhere with Eli and not ever let Brooke see him again. We just haven't seen that. That may be the case, but we haven't really seen it. Virginia, in 2016, Houck's grandmother, who has since passed away, this is true, invoked her Fifth Amendment right and refused to testify before a grand jury. Is there a burden needed to invoke the Fifth Amendment? Well, it has to fit. In other words, you have to actually be about to incriminate yourself potentially by answering the question. So if they ask you something utterly irrelevant or non-criminal, then you can't just take the Fifth Amendment. But assuming it fits, then you can do that. I believe the questions for the grandmother revolved around the use of her car and whether or not she knew that her grandsons had used her car. But I don't know a lot about that. And I think it was within the grand jury. So really, it's confidential. And that's why I think we just don't know a lot about it. We had that little leak that came out, and we don't really have any way to measure or assess that. All right, Subpoena Colada. Oh, that's a great name. Are you taking notes on that huge notepad during the trial? So I do, believe it or not, one a day. This is day 2. I had a whole pad on day 1, and each day gets its own pad because that's how much it takes. So, oh yeah, last time we did pages. So today was my most number of pages so far at 43. So y'all can hold me accountable and find out how many I do each day. All right, let me see. Notice any courtroom etiquette differences between the two commonwealths, asked Elizabeth. They're really different. Biggest one is the objections and the fact that there aren't arguments. It's so different. There's also not the greeting of each attorney in the morning. That was really unique. I'd never seen that before. But, it's just that everyone stands up. And they stand up for the judge and the jury, and you stay standing the whole time. Also, every time there's a break, every single person must exit the courtroom who's not, one of the attorneys involved in the case. So those are some differences. We'll do maybe one more. Did the Commonwealth talk, Annie Kagan, about how the body was disposed of. No, they don't know. I think they would just plainly admit that they just absolutely do not know. Miss Spunky, thank you for gifting 5 Lawyerly memberships. I really appreciate that. If you are not a member, you can always join by hitting the join button down by Lawyerly right below the video that you're watching, unless you're on your cell phone, your iPhone specifically, and then you have to go in through your browser or use your computer. But you can also get a gifted membership. You have to turn on the ability to receive that gifted membership. So Marlon, I think our two mods, our two blessed mods, help me so much, are Marlon and Mama Pinks. I think Mama Pinks is not here tonight, but Marlon will put the directions in how to do that. Yeah. And Miss Funky, well, my goodness, Miss Funky, I'm not sure I understand how that's possible, but it's spunky. All right, Sycamore Sally Esquire, justice for Crystal. I think we could all agree with that. There's 100% could agree with that. All right. Well, I will. I'll be going live during lunch tomorrow. Just a brief snippet. I'll kind of give you some information about what's happened in the day so far. Tease you for what we're going to cover tomorrow night, and we'll cover day. I think I'm going to renumber because a lot of the media were calling the jury selection day 1. That's always kind of arbitrary which way you call it. Since they already started, I'm going to redo my thumbnail, I think, for the first day of trial and call it days 1 and 2. So people don't get confused by there not being a 1, but I called today 3. So tomorrow will be day 4, and I will be back, and I will let you know what happens in court. So don't forget to subscribe, to turn the notifications on, so you'll find out. I'm not going at the exact time that I normally do because I have to get back from court and get my notes together and get the hotel Wi-Fi working. But definitely turn on the notifications so you will find it again. If you would, on the way out, if you haven't hit the like button, please do that, and I will see you tomorrow.